Yeah.
What's that? Oh, the wash is already running right now.
Oh, let's start.
Yeah, the one.
No,
Yeah, well, actually, you know what, we are about to be recorded, so I think, can you wait a couple minutes? Thanks. We'll need like 15 minutes.
Alright.
Okay. So, kind of how this is going to operate, you guys are going to ask your questions, and we're all just going to chime in. Anybody cool with that? I mean, that's not, that's how it's going to work on our end.
Okay. So first off, like, what's your job title and what do you do for the Long Island Sound?
Okay, well, I'll start that off and give the overview for everybody here. So my name's Alicia, I'm the education director here, and then we have, as we said before, Allie, Amy, Lindsay, Tim, Kate, who are full-time Soundwaters educators.
Okay. So what we do? So throughout the year, our focus is education. So we take school groups anywhere from preschool all the way up to high school groups. So that's the age range we're looking at. And we do programs, and they're all about Long Island Sound. The focus is protecting Long Island Sound through education. So depending on what the program is, we teach anything from animals up to the water quality in the sound, and it's all a lot of hands-on experiments, and we tend to do a lot of outdoor experiments as well.
We teach the students how to use different ways to measure the different parameters, so specifically related to your project, like we measure oxygen, we talk about temperature, how all of the different water quality parameters interact and how they affect one another, but then ultimately how they affect the animals, and sort of how the whole thing is like a cycle. So understanding it and actually measuring it, seeing it, how it changes throughout the year, individual seasons, and things like that. And starting to look at a little bit of some trends that we see from time to time as well.
Okay.
How much of the focus of your work is on dead zones?
Not really, not a ton. We talk about changes in oxygen levels and how that affects the animals, because the kids will from time to time see, animals that they see in waterways that might be at the surface. We'll talk about, what could cause that. But as far as actual dead zones, we don't focus very heavily on that specific
touched on it today. I was teaching water quality to our 8th grade students. We have a 8th grade watershed project. We work with all the 8th grades in Stamford, and so I was talking about, they were comparing water samples from all over the watershed, and so we talked a little bit about dead zones and what sorts of things can influence that, and that was, it's something that they find interesting because something a lot of them have never heard of before. We don't necessarily do a lot of research or focus on dead zones.
That topic does come up here and there, though, just through observations, because we do work outside with kids, so they might smell something, or be collecting and not finding much of one thing. So that topic does come up just through observation of other activities that we do.
But as far as hypoxic levels here in Long Island Sound, right at Soundwaters or in Holly Pond, we have not hit that yet as far as our teaching and testing here. I know that sometimes, maybe during summer camp at the marina, there's small pockets of like a fish kill. Have you ever heard of that term? Do a little more research on that then and find out where there's hypoxic zones, where there's a dead zone. The reason it's considered a dead zone is because there is no oxygen, and fish need the oxygen, and then they die there if there isn't any. So it'll happen end of July, usually 3rd, maybe 4th week of July through 3rd week of August. That's for the Western Sound. That's kind of the time of year where we will get a dead zone. Have you seen any?
I've seen them in marinas. That's where
Yeah.
our big target spot. Like if you're ever near, I guess where, in Greenwich for you guys, if you're down, the ferry docks and stuff, all the way pushed back in there. A lot of times, all those dead floating fish are because of hypoxic events happening, and it will happen as the summer goes on, as there's more activity, there's more people, there's more outside influences causing those events to happen. But
and there's not as much water exchange in places like that.
It
Especially
largely affects the bait fish, though. That's where you would see it hit the most. We have Bunker, or Manhattan, which is one of the most commonly eaten by the larger fish, like striped bass, bluefish. They're going to be going after that. And that's where you see a lot of the main kill-offs. I mean, you'll see them sometimes, more often like years ago, less lately, but you'll see dozens of them at the top of the water flopping around. I mean, you can pick them up with nets. They're pretty much dead already. So And of course, by having the bait fish die, that's going to affect the other
food
fish.
chain, yeah.
Right.
So, we researched that one of the biggest dead zones is in the Long Island Sound, or one of the like.
Biggest in America.
Yeah. So, what are we doing on our coast that's greatly affecting the water? Like, do we have a lot of pollution? Do we have a lot of like industries or?
Because we're at the bottom of the watershed, unfortunately, we have the benefit of being on a coast, but we have to deal with any of the effects of what's north of us.
Mm-hmm.
So because our watershed starts all the way up in Canada and drains down here, all the people within our watershed play a role. So any actions by them that could be harmful also impact us. So it multiplies, it all adds up. So it's not necessarily just us, it's kind of a combination of us as well as all the other people in the watershed.
It's also the layout of Long Island Sound.
And that.
I mean, we don't have, we're a sound, so we have water from the Atlantic Ocean coming in, and then you just have a tiny little outlet here, so there's a small little drain. It's not like water's constantly turning over and there's getting more oxygen in there. So when you go study the shape of the sound, okay? That'll be very helpful.
Yeah.
Especially, they call it Western Sound, obviously.
Yeah.
So check out the Western Sound. You don't see big waves like you would. I mean, do you guys go to Block? You go to Block Island ever?
No.
No. Okay.
Like
We
Montauk.
don't have.
Montauk, okay,
Yeah,
so,
there you go,
so
Montauk.
the end of Long Island. So it's much different out there.
Yeah.
There's more, the beaches there have more direct waves because they're getting more action from the ocean over there. But down on our end, not so much. We're like tucked in at the end.
Another issue is the fertilizer that goes on lawns, which causes plankton blooms, and the plankton blooms in themselves cause dead spots because of the drain of oxygen, because of the large amount of plankton, and that's what's going to cause a lot of your dead spots in general.
Yeah, the algae blooms.
Yeah, algae blooms.
Sorry, not plankton, algae. Strike that. Strike that off the record, my bad.
Yeah,
Noted.
plankton and
Wrong
algae
word.
blooms, and if they start to die and break down, the bacteria and other things that break them down tend to take a lot of the oxygen out of the water. So it's the whole process of them everything turning over tends to deplete the oxygen that's in the water already. And so because in the summertime the temperature is warmer water has less oxygen and colder water, so in addition to the temperature being warmer, you have things dying and sucking up the oxygen because they need them to survive, not, for a bad reason, but that's how they survive, then the oxygen goes away.
Yeah, and I think part of the issue for us also is the population here. I mean, we're just a really heavily populated area. We're close to New York. I mean, there's a lot of people living in this small side of the Western Sound where you don't have that water exchange. So all that runoff and pollution that you get from all of the people living here is just sitting, basically. It doesn't have that nice exchange of water.
And we have a lot of people living on the coast, directly on the coast. I mean, most of Greenwich, people live right up to the coastline in Greenwich, as far as they can get, So that's a big problem as well, mostly along.
We naturally outside have these salt marshes that can help filter out a lot of that runoff that can cause hypoxia. But because people like to live right by the water, a lot of the salt marsh has been removed. And definitely in this part of Connecticut, we just don't have that much salt marsh left. I mean, we barely have any here. And so we've already removed that natural filter that helps the Earth's way of cleaning things, and we've already removed that. So by missing that also contributes. So it's a lot of factors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you don't want to look at necessarily one thing as causing it. There's everything added together just makes it harder to pick which one. Most of the time people want to blame one thing. This doesn't really come down to one thing. This is just a lot of factors together. And it's, if you can pinpoint or highlight a lot of the different factors, kind of brings to light all the things that sort of play a role in it.
How do you think this issue is affecting Connecticut's economy and recreation?
I mean, recreational fishing is definitely something around here that people enjoy doing. They love being on the coast. I mean, if all of a sudden one day all you saw at the beach was dead fish, I'm sure it would strongly affect people's decision to be there. So, I mean, because a lot of this area is based around, weather, being outside, people want to be on the water. If the situation gets too problematic, I think it would affect people's, they wouldn't like it as much. Maybe they wouldn't want to spend as much time outside. It could change, choices recreationally on the water, things like that.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I think people around here are more aware of not letting garbage go into the water. People get that. I mean, that part's probably improved. But I think people don't realize is runoff. That can be a problem. Just things from your yard and from the roads that run into the sound, because it's not necessarily things like big things that you can see. So it's a little bit harder to think of. So I think people generally are pretty good about not just like throwing their garbage in the sound, but it's things like runoff that are.
You guys have been at the beach, and they like probably after a big storm, you've seen how the water's closed off, right, in the summertime. That's because of all the runoff getting in, and we need time for it to circulate and for the tides to change, because all that direct, especially if we have, in the spring, we get a lot of those spring showers, which are great, but people that are trying to already get into those recreational habits of going to the beach and going in the water, it's not healthy for us. That's why there is that notice not to go in the water. That's why lifeguards will tell you can't swim because of the runoff.
The other thing some people may or may not be aware of is all the storm drains on the street. A lot of them have those like blue circles on top. That's an organization put those on to let people know that any of the water in those storm drains drains into pipes directly into the sound. So a lot of people's misconception is that that's like sewer water going into Long Island Sound. It's not. It's just storm drain water. And, with all the things that get trapped in those storm drains, it's possible for that to make its way in as well. So a lot of it's just awareness as to what are the different ways pollution can get into Long Island Sound. And if people knew that, they would make different decisions about, if they wash their car, next to the road, or if they're changing the oil in their car, and if things leak out, just how that actually can affect things.
Yeah, and just economically, I mean, obviously fish kills and hypoxic zones are going to affect our, seafood that people are catching and selling and that sort of stuff. So those are effects economically.
I mean, oysters are a huge industry here.
Shellfishing, oysters in Connecticut, and lobstering about 2 decades ago used to be a huge economic boost. It was. Do you know that at all?
Yeah, we're looking into.
So you're reading into that, okay. So it's not necessarily that they think it's pollution that's been the problem, but there was other factors as well. So you can't necessarily pinpoint one thing, because really, who's gonna, I'm not the Lorax, I don't speak for the trees, but the trees can't speak for themselves, Long Island Sound can't speak for itself. Do you know where I'm going on that?
Yeah.
You get that?
I mean, I saw a graph and it said in the 1990s there was so many more sales than there
It was
are
a $1 billion industry. At one
Yes.
point, lobstering. Now, it's gone.
It's gone. You don't see lobster buoys out there. They're gone.
And the lobsters that have been caught, there's something recently showing about like shell rot and like all these deformations in their shell, and they, from different contaminants, different pollutants getting into the water.
But on the other hand, remember, we were always on the southernmost point as far as temperature for that population. So.
Right.
Maybe
is it
they
pollution? Is it temperature?
It could be. There's a couple different factors. Is it oxygen?
Right. It is one.
I can tell you no, it's not oxygen, because if it was oxygen, it wouldn't just be the lobsters that are gone.
So what do you think is contributing to the losses, shellfish, or the industry?
It's controversial. It's a controversial standpoint. It depends on, is it the temperature change? Has the temperature's increased in the water overall? Or is it the toxins that have been sprayed in, which would just automatically hurt?
Pesticides from lawns?
In general, groundwater holds on to chemicals like DDT and there are a variety of chemicals that stay in the groundwater, and they work their way up through the system. So you'll have a plankton with some minuscule amount of DDT, minuscule particles, but as other animals eat that and as it moves its way up the food chain, it's gonna get worse. So things like dolphins, I mean, not that we necessarily have them in the Sound, but like where you have that kind of stuff, the larger animals especially have a lot more in them. You just see the chemicals transfer and get worse as you go up the food chain.
For a lot of things, it's also parasites. I mean, for oysters, for a while, there were different forms of parasites and disease that affected them. That could be related to temperature and different conditions that make it more possible for bacteria or other things to grow. So warmer temperatures might make it easier for those things to grow, whereas colder water may not. So there's, the water quality and environmental factors affect the things within the water that can affect the animals as well. So that's why, again, you can't just pinpoint one thing, because everything kind of like works together, and you can't take one thing out, because it's not like a controlled experiment to figure it out. Everything is having an effect.
Well, do you think in our individually, do you have any ideas of what we can do, like maybe with our daily lives or maybe as a community, what we can do to stop not all the pollution that are going into the sound, but maybe like reduce it? Do you have any ideas on what to do?
I mean, I think it's true that people say every little bit helps. So, just being conscious of, especially what you're putting onto your lawns, and, if you're outside, washing your cars or your parents' cars and that sort of stuff. Just being aware of the type of stuff you're putting into the environment, whether it's pesticides or fertilizers or chemical cleaners or anything like that. If everybody just took a step to be more aware of that sort of thing and consciously use less chemicals and less fertilizer, then, would it solve everything? No. But would it help and make a dent? Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely the choice-consequence relation. You all have a choice every day. Do you choose to use your reusable cup, water bottle, or do you use your plastic water bottle? That's huge, because it's not just the plastic that doesn't degrade, it's what went into making it. There had to be a factory there, so that's air pollution. There has to be some discharge to keep their equipment cooled, so that's going right into the waters wherever that plant is. Does that make sense to you? So it's,
and then you have
really
distribution and a variety of other things that it's just a continuous usage of everything that's going to add more pollutants.
So it's really making that right choice at that moment, do you choose to use highly toxic chemicals every day? No. Do you want that on your skin? Do you want that on your clothing? No. It's going to affect, we don't know necessarily the effects of all the chemicals we use. I think there's big things you can do, green products.
There's a lot of companies that have gone very green, things that are biodegradable. So you guys could even look into companies that have made the decisions to take out things like phosphates and what's the other one we were looking at the cleaner yesterday? There's certain things like you can look for ingredients that they've started removing, things that break down. So for some of our outdoor equipment, we have to rinse it. We make the choice to add things that won't affect the ground, won't go back into the water. So you could look into that, changes companies are making.
And even things, a lot of companies now, like a lot of water bottles and things have changed shape lately, and that's so that they can package better, so that they take up less space in a cargo container, so use less cargo container, less transportation, fuel and that sort of stuff. So every little bit like that, and it's choices everybody makes every day.
I think there's also being patient. I think that's huge, because who doesn't enjoy a beautiful green lawn? Most people enjoy it. So you can use your chemical fertilizer, or you can take a little bit more time and effort and use your organic fertilizers. That can be composting, just seeding, and just a little bit of elbow work to get it going.
What differences on the environment would a chemical fertilizer have versus an organic one?
Yeah.
So a lot of the chemicals. I mean, one of the main chemicals that we get in fertilizer that affects Long Island Sound is nitrogen. And that causes, Tim was talking about that a little bit earlier, that nitrogen causes big algae blooms. And then, from there it's just this cycle. All this algae blooms, things aren't eating it all, so it sinks to the bottom and dies. The bacteria start to break it down. The bacteria need oxygen, so they're using all the oxygen to break down the dead stuff, and then that's when you get hypoxia. So, there's just a chain of events that happens, and it's all from nitrogen, and a big source of that is a chemical fertilizer. If you look on the ingredients of a lot of fertilizers, it's like nitrogen, potassium, stuff like that. So nitrogen's a big one.
So is there no nitrogen in organic fertilizers?
Might be different percentages, there might be different ratios. It depends on the company.
I think from different
nitrates,
sources also.
Nitrates they do naturally occur in organic stuff, and even when people use manure and things like that, that's a natural ingredient that comes from the animal waste. But
it's less. It would be probably less concentrated and from a more natural source in an organic fertilizer as opposed to this. And heavily concentrated chemicals.
Nitrates themselves are not bad, by the way. Just so you guys know, that's a natural part of the nitrogen cycle. So these things we're talking about are not things that are not present in nature. They are, but just when everything is blown out of proportion, when everything gets to be too much. When it becomes too much, that's when it's bad. But there are supposed to be nitrates in nature. That's actually in the water. Ammonia, which is when animals go to the bathroom, gets turned into that, and then plants use it. So it's a natural part of the cycle. It's just when there's too much and it can't be taken care of or taken out in the right manner.
Are there any major industries or companies around here that are really like contributing to this problem of the like, or is it more like in our own
Residentially based.
Yeah, residential.
I think this goes back to what Amy said as far as Long Island Sound being the end of the line for the watershed. That everything from Vermont and down is flowing right into Long Island Sound. Major companies, there's no major company that is consistently doing it, constantly doing it. I mean, they're not spilling anything in. Are they following all their environmental permitting and policies and practices? Yes. If not, they get fined hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. So yeah, I mean, and we wouldn't necessarily know if there's a company that's not.
Nobody wants
here.
to
It's not
advertise that.
I mean,
Nobody
over
wants
the
to.
last 50
Right.
years, industry has cleaned up tremendously for better environmental standards.
Everybody wants to claim how green they are. They want to brag about how green they're becoming, how environmentally friendly they are, because otherwise you're the big bad guy and nobody
Right.
likes you.
And
So
green is
everybody's
trendy.
trying to make it better. So it's hard to say that, to pinpoint that.
Are sewage plants improving their treatments to make them more green, or?
Absolutely. I know Stamford took over about 7 years ago maybe, a multi-million-dollar overhaul to change how they are processing it to make sure that they have bigger tanks that can handle the supply, which ultimately eliminates the overflow. You've heard of a sewage overflow before, and then that's what shuts the beaches down in the summer when it hasn't rained or anything. So sewage companies and water pollution control authorities in towns are definitely putting in the money and investing in being more environmentally friendly.
So we know that organizations such as like the EPA have a goal of reducing the nitrogen levels in the sound by 58% by 2017. Do you know of any ways that the state or the organization are trying to make a difference?
Or like steps that the state's taking to reach our goal? Any like policies?
I would say that actually we have this for you guys. Have you read this yet? The Long Island Sound
Is it
Health
still-
from the
Sound
Long Island
study.
Sound Study.
Oh yeah, we saw this.
If you don't have, this is a great one to reference to. Off the top of my head, and I'm not sure if off the top of any of your heads we have any ideas of exact policies that have been implemented, but definitely it would tell you there, and the Connecticut DEP would be your best resource for that. We're not necessarily an environmental advocacy group, we are an environmental educational group.
Yeah.
We read some of this, like the shellfish section, and
Were you surprised?
that was where I saw the chart where like they'd lowered by an incredible amount. So I thought that was really cool.
You said it used to be $1 billion industry, the shellfishing
Lobstering
industry.
and shellfishing, yeah.
It is now only brings in about 30 million a year.
Right. And that's a high number. That's combining all of it. That's
Yeah.
commercial fishing. Lobstering alone used to be millions and billions. I mean, do you guys remember, Lindsay, when you're from here, do you remember seeing all the lobster pots and all the lobster boats out there? Tim, you would too.
Every
I mean,
day.
You would probably
Yeah.
much.
I was on the water a lot.
Hauled out.
I was
Yeah.
saying, yeah, you
Hauled
drive
out
by
of
a
water.
marina now
I mean-
and a dock and you'll
What'd you
see
pull out of the
them
water today?
stacked everywhere.
What?
What is that?
Oh, I don't know. It was like chicken
Trap.
wires.
Oh, never mind.
I actually used to lobster fish myself on the Sound, just recreationally, and I can tell you, like, 7 years ago, it got to a point where I would catch so much lobster I was sick of eating it. Like, I would actually give lobster away, and a few years after that, putting my pots in, nothing. I mean, you go out there now. We put a couple in last year just to feel it out. We didn't catch really anything.
Why?
That's like, I was reading something one time, this was just like fun tidbit, back like in the early 1700s when people were first colonizing this area, there was so much lobster that it was given to prisoners as food because it was like considered, who would want to eat that? Like there's so much of it. It was just like common or like eating.
Right, too common.
Yeah, like way too, like give it to the prisoners. So.
What has
Interesting.
made the decline of shellfishing so steep? And
Like we said before, it's kind of like
Who
a
knows?
combination of things. It's hard to really pinpoint. I mean, it's things from chemicals to, you know,
Again, they like
diseases,
cold.
everything.
I mean, lobsters in particular want colder, darker places. That's where their habitat
Rocky.
is. Rocky environments, and they might. I mean, we can't say that. Oh, they're migrating out to warm or to colder waters. We don't know that exactly, but we do know that their population
They're
is
not
just
here.
dropping, and it's several reasons. We can't exactly say what it is, but
Is it still dropping or is it stable?
I think it's pretty much dropped off.
Yeah.
I have a family friend, and that was his job. He was a lobsterman, and he has not been working for a while now. So he has his lobster boat. He had all his lobster pots, and he hasn't been able to go out and get lobsters in and around Greenwich. That's where he was in a long time. So
Repopulating a species like that takes a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of research, a lot to know about how to do it. I mean, when they repopulated a lot of the oysters, they genetically created this like disease-resistant form of it. And that takes a lot of time and energy. And it depends if you have somebody who can fund that and who has time to do the research to find out what it exactly takes to fix that. I don't know if genetically modified lobsters exist.
maybe one
It all
day.
depends. But because they live so deep in the water, to be able to put them down and then get them back up and study them, like, it's not like putting something in a shallow area and checking on it all the time. So as far as being able to repopulate would take a lot of time and effort as well.
And a lot of it, I think, has to do with adaptations, and it takes years and years and years for animals to adapt to something. Well, if one of the major reasons why we have this decline is temperature, we know our water's not getting colder, it's getting warmer. If the species can recover and start living in a warmer temperature, that's going to take years for them to adapt to be able to live in a warmer temperature. So it could be years till we can kind of understand it and know if it's something that can be recovered or not.
Do you guys have any like personal connections with like a lot of the stuff we've talked about with like, you know, the environment and all that, things that you can remember that like you feel like have changed with this, or that you kind of like, anything that we've said kind of sparked something in your head about something you've seen or things that you've noticed when you've been at the beach or with fishing and all that, like the connections you guys have to it?
The beaches have been closing. The Long Island Sound beaches, I know they've been closing. When
we see it every summer when it rains here, because our kids will come to summer camp and be like, why can't we go in the water? We'll be like, we're making sure you're safe. So.
And I mean, Greenwich Town beaches do the same thing. I used to lifeguard when I was in school, so it's the same drill. We still had to lifeguard and tell everybody you can't go in the water, and we would have to wait sometimes more than one day. Sometimes it would be a couple of days depending how bad the storm was. So.
You know, I think that there's also more people here now than there was a little while ago. So I think we're just starting to see the impact of all the people, but because we are now a little more environmentally sound and aware, but I think we've hit the low. Would you guys agree that we've probably hit the low? I mean, the majority of people, you guys make decisions unconsciously now. I mean, you're not grabbing water bottles all day long. You're using your Nalgene bottles, and every now and then I'm sure you use a water bottle, but you're making those decisions to not purchase the highly toxic chemicals. You're not, that's just part of your generation. So I think we're kind of going back to that, and hopefully hypoxia will be, kind of a thing of the past, other than in small, no-flow water zone areas like the Little Marina that doesn't have the ability for the smaller fish. Once they get trapped in there, they don't have the ability to go back out. And I kind of think that's where we are. But as far as enjoying Long Island Sound, I think people are going to do that for hopefully hundreds of years to come. It's wonderful to be out on the water. Yeah. Last thoughts?
Just a good resource for you guys to use. There's a book that's a comprehensive ecological history of the Long Island Sound called This Fine Piece of Water. And it's got a lot on hypoxia and it's got a lot on dead zones.
By Tom Anderson.
Thank you.
And that'll probably be one of your better resources. I think you would get a lot of data out of that for sure. Specific numbers.
He is actually now the communications director for the Connecticut DEP and Connecticut Audubon. So you can look him up.
Okay, thank you.
He's great. Any last questions? No.
Because there's a lot more to think about, right?
Yeah. So what are you gonna do now? You get all this information. What do you do? What's your next step? Where are you
Well,
to present this?
We have to think of a specific angle to come from because pollution is such a big topic. So we have to figure that out first, and then we have to write a 15-page paper and
Do a
like
presentation.
20-minute presentation.
15 pages minimum.
Yeah.
And then we have to do a presentation for 2 grades.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So do you guys have any ideas, like specific angles that would be interesting to take?
Oh gosh.
What of all of it, like, to you guys, what feels like directionally, like, what seems most interesting? And as far as all the different things we've talked about, like, what do you like, what do you think sounds good to look at? Like, that you could conceivably do?
I think it's always good to, like, talk about topics that could bring out change in, like, everyday life. So if we brought it back to, like,
Us.
yeah,
Like our community.
and little things that you could do every day to improve such a big topic.
Like when we sat down and we got our groups, our main things, but we wanted to do environment and we wanted to do something that like maybe would help people change their everyday lives just a tiny bit to help not reduce pollution, but like stop the pollution.
Help
In that case, I would talk about consumerism and how our choices affect things in general. The way things work is like, if all of us are like buying plastic water bottles for the convenience of it, then companies are going to keep selling that. But if we make the change individually to buy other things, then companies aren't going to be making money off that anymore. So it really comes down to us making the decisions actively to choose the products that aren't going to harm the environment around us. So I would talk, I think consumerism is definitely a big thing.
Which kind of goes back to choices, consequences. That
And
makes
then,
sense.
do you guys think that you could connect some of the more environmental issues and the different consequences back to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
I mean, if you're talking about choices, maybe it's something like, okay, these are 2 kinds of fertilizers you can get. Look at the content of different, like, nitrogens and things in them. What would you choose? All right, these 2 different types of bottles. What are the environmental impacts of this bottle? Like, what output goes in the environment from producing that and this one, and what's a better choice? You know, maybe it's like just making comparison. What's the environmental impact on this product versus this product? And how could that affect the sound ultimately?
Just for
kind of-
sorry.
Go ahead.
Just what you were saying about the packaging of the water bottles, I thought that was really interesting. Just how like
Yeah, I
one
never knew
less,
that.
Making them smaller.
yeah, one less like ride on a truck
Yeah.
is like impacting the water.
Little things like that, and a lot of companies have changed like their packaging and that sort of stuff because ultimately, it's green is trendy right now. So you know when your product is a little bit greener in some way, that's going to sell better with the consumer, but it's also going to save the company money overall if they're spending less money on shipping and transportation and that sort of stuff. Not only is it better for the environment, but it's better for the economics of the company overall.
So, kind of jumping off of what Kate was saying before, different products for your capstone project, for your presentation, do you have to do any research behind this as far as having factual data and going out and talking with people? If you're going to go along the lines of, consumerism and what do people buy, if you had different options, could you take a poll? Could you do a survey? I'm just trying to give you
Yeah.
is that somewhere, some direction you would go that, instant gratification is huge. Everybody wants their tomato plants growing tomorrow and they want nice bright red ones, and they can buy that fertilizer, or they can take a little more time and buy the natural one, have the organic. So is it instant gratification versus organic versus price? That's kind of the difference.
Yeah.
And that'd be an interesting poll
Yeah,
to
that's
see,
cool.
because then what are the environmental effects and impacts from all of those?
And the same thing is true with food choices as well, like as far as the meat that you're eating and how that was produced, and like there's a ton of water and energy that goes into producing red meat as opposed to compared to like chicken or something like that. So little choice, and where they were brought up, it was a really big farm, small farm, that sort of thing.
Or even like the soil on the farm can affect.
Exactly.
And the reason those things are more expensive is because people aren't buying them as much. And when you have more people make that choice to buy them, then the price is going to go down automatically, and you're going to have lower prices on the better stuff, and the other companies are going to go, okay, well, we need to invest in that instead, and they're going to switch over to that. Exactly.
Yeah. You also, going back to, we talked about the sort of generational changes, and with the poll idea is kind of look at it from a perspective of, polling people in different age groups and see if you see a trend in people's attitudes. And that could go into, consumerism and, if you're in this demographic of age and this demographic versus that demographic, do you see these changes, and, do we need to push the younger generations or the older generations and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, and I think something that's also, I think people that grow up on the coast, that grow up on a coastline are a lot more aware of what their, choices and effects and consequences have on their environment, whereas people that maybe grow up more inland that don't really see a lot of environmental effects or environmental impacts in some areas might not be as conscious of what consequences every decision they make has.
Good? Give you a little jumping off point maybe?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot for you guys to think about with that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. It was great to meet you.
Great
We hope we'd love to see kind of a draft of your paper, or see what comes through.
When's
the
the end of the year?
When's the presentation too?
Are you doing a PowerPoint with it?
They're in May.
It's like
on
anything.
three separate
PowerPoint.
Fridays.
Have you ever heard of
video.
Prezi? It's like this new online.
It's like a video / PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you guys want to do?
Be cool.
That would be cool to see.
That'd
We
be
could
cool
see
to
the
see that.
presentation. Prezi? Oh, you said Prezi?
Yeah.
Prezi.
Prezi.
Okay.
Oh.
I mean, this is a month project. They lowered it. They shortened it from last year.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it's due the 5th
Of May?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Good luck.
Yeah,
Good
you got
luck.
a good, looks like you got a good start.
You
You
guys have a great
guys
start.
have
So.
a
Thank
great
you.
topic.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great topic.
Alright.
Just make sure you guys limit yourself. You can keep going with it, and it can be exponential. You're gonna have to at some point cap it so that you don't just keep going. So just recognize at some point, once you hit a certain idea, you have to stop there and just stay with that, or
You'll
will go on
definitely be able
forever.
to fill 15 pages.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
We probably gave you 15 right now.
Thank
All
you
right.
so
Well,
much.
thank you. You're welcome.
Have a good afternoon.
We'll talk
Yeah,
to
you
you.
guys can take the newspaper.
Yeah, I recommend taking those. Just gives you good background info. Alright, you guys don't drive, do you?
No.
No.
I have
You have a